Hey guys, we're doing this online. This is like my fourth time attempting this video, so I'm probably going to sound pretty bored going through this one more time. This video is going to cut off after 10 minutes. I'm going to keep talking, but you got to click on the next YouTube video because YouTube's not going to let me go over 10 minutes. And I appear to not be smart enough to remember to stop a video in 10 minutes, so I programmed this thing to just cut me off. Hey, how's it going? Hope you're having a good stay home. Stay safe out there. Let's talk about business optimization. It's business optimization. So last time before spring break, we spent a long time on the optimization part, where we got all these functions that we're trying to maximize or minimize or whatever. And we saw the hardest versions of that before spring break, with shapes of cans and packaging and all these maximization, minimization stuff. Today we're going back to the older topics we were talking about business functions, revenue, cost, product. Let's recall these real quick. We have a revenue function. A total revenue function gives how much revenue you make from selling Q items. C was our cost function. Pi was our profit function. These were related because profit equals revenue minus cost, and their derivatives, marginal profit equals marginal revenue minus marginal cost. The first time we saw that fact, that was sort of a novelty. Now we know the rules of differentiation, and we know that, if you're subtracting two functions, you take their derivatives one at a time, and we know that really well. Oh, I guess I should also mention Q stood for quantity. Quantity is the number of items sold. I'm going to talk about it like it's items, although very often, especially in these revenue contexts, they're not items, they're often services. But, well, it's the number of sales of whatever the thing is that you're selling. So, at the babyest level, it's just, hey, remember these functions. Sometimes you want to optimize these. Maybe you want to find the maximum revenue. Maybe you want to find the maximum profit. Maybe they hand you the revenue and cost functions and say find the maximum profit. So you need to write down the profit function. And then you maximize it doing the exact same stuff we were doing before spring break. You take the derivative, set it equal to 0. That's your critical point. It's probably your maximum. Do something to actually know that it's a maximum, and that special juice is the hard part. So our first real new thing going on, though, is we're going to zoom in on the revenue function first. In the last batch of problems like this, we would often have a function of the form something like R of Q equals 15Q. When you have a version of revenue like this, the old one, what this means is that revenue is you're bringing in $15 for every item you sold. The interpretation of that is really easy. It means that you're selling the items for $15 a piece. This version's really easy because the price is fixed. This happens in life. If you are selling an item in a market that's crowded with other versions of that item, very often the market is forcing you to sell the item at that price. You can't charge any higher and expect to sell anything. You can't charge any lower and expect to make any money. Like, you're very locked into how much you get to charge. If you're the only version of this item, or if you're special in some way, though, and you get to set your price, and there's some ability to do that, then the fact that you can change the price, usually price and quantity are a little bit related. So we didn't use a P for profit because P is going to be used for price. And they are usually related by something called a demand curve. If I'm not locking my price in at $15, if I'm thinking about changing the price, then I got to ask myself, at different prices, how many am I going to be able to sell? The annoying thing about this is most of the functions we deal with in math, we only talk about the functions one way. In this function, we're going to look at both ways. We will sometimes talk about price as a function of quantity. Sometimes we will talk about quantity as a function of price. They both have reasons for us to talk about them. For example, we talked about revenue and cost and profit functions just a second ago. They were all functions of Q. So if I'm in a context where I keep talking about everything as a function of Q, that's a good reason for me to talk about price as a function of Q. It'll blend in with the others. If I'm dealing with those other functions, this is the sensible thing to do. On the other hand, if I'm a manufacturer, I'm not that likely to think of Like, I think about a function in terms of inputs and outputs. I plug something in and I see what comes out. And when I am a manufacturer, the thing the market does feels more like a function in the other direction, where I put a price tag on a thing, I send it to the store, I get a report back from the store, and I was able to sell this many. Like, the function happens in that direction. I put in a price and I find out the amount I was able to sell. It's less intuitive to think about it the other way, where I want to sell this many. What is the price I can charge that will still, I guess the highest price I can charge that will still sell that many, is what's happening in the left version of this function. We have reasons to talk about them both, and they'll both be around. And, like, the key thing going on here is that in either version, if there's one new formula for today's lecture, it's that revenue equals price times quantity. And this is kind of actually two versions of the function, depending on which of those letters, P or Q. One of those is a variable. The other one is some expression in terms of that variable. If I want R as a function of P, then this is price, the variable, times Q, which is some function of P. I can never write a P the first time. Or it's going to be revenue as a function of Q will be take that price function of Q and multiply it by the variable Q. Both of these are versions of the same formula. Revenue is price times quantity, but one of those letters is a variable and one of those letters is a function, and it's unclear which is which until you're actually in the problem. This is the same setup as that. Revenue is price, the price being always 15, times quantity. Quantity here is the variable. Let's try an example that uses this formula. So suppose I have a boat, and I give tours on my boat, and from experience I find that when I charge $80 a ticket, I can sell about 300 tickets per week. And it seems like every $5 price cut I put on that price, my sales increase by about 20 tickets a week. This is all in per week. The per week thing you don't have to worry about. Like, my sales are 300, increasing or decreasing by 20 for every $5 change to the price. Two questions here. Question one, what's the relationship between price and quantity? That is, what is the demand curve? Find that P and Q relationship that we were talking about. Step two, use that to write a formula for the revenue function, R of Q, and maximize that function. And it's got the extra instructions to show that it's the maximum. That's referring to, don't just find the critical point and say this is the maximum. Actually verify that that thing is a maximum, the ways we talked about. There's two main ways of doing that. Maybe it's a closed interval. Maybe the second derivative is always negative or always positive. If neither of those works, you're probably making a whole big sign chart of the first derivative, and things are gross. Let's start by trying to write down the relationship between P and Q. So my price, my price started at 80, and my quantity started at 300. And I know I'm going to make a chart because it's the easy way to understand. Like, this problem's being obnoxious by trying to describe the function in a goofy sentence. This is making this version of the problem extra hard. Most of these will just give you the formula that relates P and Q. But here, we're trying to take this understanding and come up with the formula. When the price is 80, we're able to sell 300, and we say that when we cut the price by 5, so if we bring it down to 75, the sales will go up by 20, so we'll get to 320. And if we cut it down to 70, we'd be up to 340. And if we cut it down to 65, we'd be up to 360, and so on, and Scooby-Dooby-Doo. How do we write a formula that connects those things? I'm running out of time. I'm going to try and be smart and stop the video instead of just... Where did...